Oh, you.
All right, you guys. Listen, I hope you guys, what's going on? Verse. This is it the metaverse we calling it now? Anyway, hi you guys. We are excited today. We are on a live discussion about the untold stories of Black history. And one of the greatest stories I thought was really interesting to start that off would be the story of Seneca Village. And I'm excited because with this, it's all in tribute to Black History Month. I think oftentimes we think about Black History Month and we think about automatically go to slavery and the civil rights movement. And I just think the most common things. And I think there's so many other different things, especially about our history, that we need to talk about, share about. Resilience is always one of them. And I love the resilience of the Seneca Village story. And so, today, I have with me for this discussion is Mr. Bilal Morris. Say hi.
What's up, y'all?
What's
What's up?
going on? What's
All
up?
right.
And today he is the senior news editor at News One, and he wrote this incredible piece about Seneca Village. When I read it, figured out who he was. Definitely wanted to reach out for him to share, his perspective and just his thought process of the story and some of the things that he discovered about it. But let me not keep gassing you. You introduce yourself and the people out there.
You're good at guessing me. You want to go on a road with me? Let me know. But nah, Bilal Morris, it's a pleasure to be here. Happy Black History Month.
Yeah.
Senior editor at News One. I have a passion for writing black. That was my dog. My fault. I have a passion for writing Black folklore stories. So stories that have some truth about them, right? But there's also levels of history that really can't be proven. So that's why we kind of took the folklore angle with some of these stories. And Seneca Village was one of the early stories that I penned around Black folklore. And for those of you who don't know, Seneca Village was a Black funded city in the 1800s in New York that now is covered by Central Park. So if you've been in New York and Central Park is one of the most beautiful parks in the world, but its history definitely ties into our Black history. And a lot of people don't know that. So history leaves breadcrumbs. And if you can put those breadcrumbs together, you could tell amazing stories. So that's why I dove into the story about Seneca Village.
Awesome. Well, I guess you kind of answered. Let's dive into the discussion, and you kind of answered my first question. And you guys too, feel free to comment any questions you may have throughout this discussion. If you are interested, react, hit some hearts, some likes. We love it all. We'll repeat it because this is our history. It's about not just our history, but really the versatility of what our history come from and the resilience. So I'm excited about it. But you kind of answered it. What inspired you to write this story and why?
So like I said, history really does inspire me anyway, especially Black history, because our Black history has been told through certain funnels, right? And those funnels sometimes can just be filled with pain and filled with stories of angst and filled with stories of our slavery and things like that. But I've been on this journey to find stories that we can tell, even if it's through a folklore lens, right? That we could tell that show the resilience, show the pride, show things from history that you might not know existed when it comes to Black people. So that's why I dove into the story. And what was interesting, I had heard before that there was a Black city under Central Park. I mean, I lived in New York for a second, so I did hear that, but I never really did any research on it. And boy, oh boy, when you dive into some of these stories, you end up going down a rabbit hole, right? But the rabbit hole is a good rabbit hole because you find out things that you would have believed to even be a story, let alone part of our American history, because Black history is American history, and I think a lot of times we keep those things separate when there's really no reason to keep those things. We had two hands in building this country. So our history, this country's history is our history as well. So me being able to tell some of these stories, it just gives me joy, right? So that's where it started. But the story got juicy when I was doing a little bit of research and I learned a little bit about William Hamilton, who was the founder of Seneca Village. So you want to jump into juice? I know you got questions.
Yeah, I got questions. Because that was a good one. All right, so you guys, I will Bilal, if you can drop the link to your story so people can have opportunity to just read it and follow along if you haven't, just to do that. But listen, you talked about William Hamilton, and for people who don't know, William Hamilton was the son of William.
Allegedly. So
Allegedly. So not only did Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings have some, mulattoes going on, Alexander Hamilton did too. So,
so
you know,
so this is where the story
allegedly,
this is where the
allegedly,
story gets very
yeah,
interesting.
very interesting. And so a lot of people don't know Alexander Hamilton is allegedly Alexander Hamilton's son.
Yes,
And
so William
so
Hamilton, the founder of
of
Seneca Village,
Seneca Village, yes, the
is
founder of
allegedly, yeah,
allegedly.
because and this is the beauty about folklore and the beauty about stories. Like I said, they have some history tied in, but a lot of this stuff can't be proven. So we live through stories, right? And this is one
Right,
of
go
the
ahead.
stories. Oh, let me put my headphones on.
Uh-oh, he's putting his headphones in.
Just because there was a little echo.
Okay.
All right, we're back.
Okay, good.
So folklore in stories allows you to connect some dots, right? So this is a really good story. I was watching Hamilton on Disney Plus. That's how it started, right? So, Hamilton was low key a playboy. You feel what I'm saying? And even
So
if
you saying William Hamilton, the founder of Seneca
Alexander, I'm
Village?
talking about his dad,
Oh,
Alexander.
Alexander. Okay. So you guys were giving you some
Yes,
backstory
I'm giving you a
to
little
the
bit of backstory
story.
about this. So Alexander, you know, if you watched Hamilton, the Broadway play, amazing, right? But
Mm-hmm.
in it, they tell the story of Alexander Hamilton, and he has a son that's prominent in the story that was a part of his life, right? And they don't touch on the illegitimate part. They start after he was on the shores. But if you do research, Alexander Hamilton came to America and supposedly fell in love with a black woman, right? And that's not that unheard of because we love black women. You feel what I'm saying? So he supposedly, allegedly fell in love with a black woman. They had a child, and that child was William Hamilton.
Wow. And
William
William
Hamilton,
Hamilton was the founder of
Seneca Village.
Seneca Village.
Yep.
So that's just some backstory because everybody often thinks about some of our founding fathers that they didn't have no black kids. And I think everybody always knows about the Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings story. But this is also a really great story because Alexander Hamilton was one of them too, because he allegedly was with a freed woman of color from Europe. So that was really something interesting I thought was great about the story. All right, let's get into it. So y'all got some backstory of the founder.
Before
A
we
little
go
bit
into the
backstory.
story, because I think this is important as well, because in the early 1800s in the
Right.
North, right,
Mhm.
there were, when I put the air quotes because prominent, I can't put prominent in the same conversation as like white prominent people in the 1800s, but there were black people with a little bit of wealth, a little bit of a little bit of money to be able to move in a society that normally we couldn't move in, right? But William Hamilton was one of those people, and him and a few other more wealthy blacks in New York at the time came together to create the New York African Society for Mutual Relief. That society was the society that was able to pull the money together and start to buy plots of land, with the sole intent of trying to create a self-sustaining black community in a time where those didn't exist, right? And B, people had no clue that they could even build things like this. So it was great to have some of these forward-thinking, gentlemen to be able to build that society, and then also build churches that would feed off of the society once they became a little bit more prominent. So that's how they were able to raise the money to then buy land, because you have to buy land in order to get any type of socio-economical climb of the ladder during that period.
Yes. So my question is, you talked about the mutual funding. So let's kind of revert back to the beginning of the mutual funding. Kind of skip prior to. So on your story, you talked about John and Elizabeth Whitehead. They were They sold their lands to blacks in the 1825s in New
Mhm.
York for Seneca Village, which was kind of unheard of for white people in that era. So why do you think John and Elizabeth sold their land in 1824 to blacks? And then my other question is, do you think they saw prominence in black wealth, or do you think they wanted to help create black wealth and establish diversity in black communities?
So I wish I could have found the answer to that question because I did. I did look. But as I was doing more research and other stories, yes, there were some white families who did not agree with slavery, who were against it. There were also some families who changed their minds um, about having slaves and owning slaves, and then ended up selling some of their land to some of their
Mhm.
former slaves. So yes, I would love to hope to believe that John and Elizabeth Whitehead saw, had a vision of creating some black
Right.
wealth for some disenfranchised human beings. I couldn't tell you that to be the answer. You feel what I'm saying? But one of the other things that it could possibly be, there was a lot of turmoil going on.
Mhm.
Not only in New York, but economically throughout the country. So,
Mhm.
a lot. There was a couple of crashes of the stock market and things like that made wealthy white landowners just sell land like they're selling stock because
And this is
there's.
he's giving some facts about everybody thinks that white people there was a everybody think when people think about stocks and the crashing of stocks, people always revert to the Great Depression. But there was also a crash before the Great Depression, which was in the 1800s, like right around like the middle of slavery. That's what I'm saying. That's why they kept selling land and selling it to free blacks, because they just didn't have the cash. A lot of brokers, especially if you don't know your research, New York was founded by the Dutchess. So the Dutchess sold their land because they were in debt.
Mhm.
They were in debt. So
It's funny
yes.
that you say that, and we won't pivot too much because that's a
Right,
whole.
yeah, we're not gonna go too
But
much.
there is another black town. If you want to do a little research, that disappeared. They were able to save it and create a historical spot for it in New York called Weeksville. And the people who the black people who were able to acquire that land got it through the crash.
Oh wow.
Wealthy white landowners just on pennies on a dollar selling their land because they're thinking that they're about to lose a whole bunch of money by holding on to this land. So we use some of those downturns of America for our benefit. It shows you our resilience a little bit.
I think that's awesome. My next question for you is, from the beginning, Seneca Village grew to this black utopia, right? So according to your story, by 1850, Seneca, it became a 10 home, went from being a 10 home community to a 50 home community with three churches and an all black school and cemetery. How significant was it for them to create this utopia? And the next question is, the growth in this community was unheard of, and how do they think they were able to sustain their unity in monetary wealth and mindset?
So the first question, can you repeat that one more time? I'm sorry.
The
Just the
first
beginning.
question was, how significant was it for them to create this utopia?
So that's a good question because Weeksville, or excuse me, now I'm getting Seneca Village also was home to Irish as well. Like New York
Right.
was a real up and down place during the 1800s. A lot of immigrants were coming to New York. The infamous 5 points. If you ever heard of 5 points, where it's just infamous for violence. So Weeksville actually was able to create a multicultural city within turmoil. You feel what I'm saying? That was able to
Mhm.
sustain for a nice long period of time. I mean, it obviously uh, things end, the beautiful things of black people sometimes end, and this did. But I think that was the biggest takeaway from that time period, because you're able to create a community of multiculturalism during a time period which did not see that, which did not want that, which did not promote that. right? So that's a beautiful thing because I mean, look at our communities now. You know,
Mhm.
we're multicultural, and that it just goes to show you that black people, we just wanted to be. You feel what I'm saying?
We just wanted equality.
Yeah,
We
we
just
just
wanted to just live in
conquer,
our freedom. Mhm.
trying to be, and we were able to be until we weren't. You feel me?
Awesome. Yeah. I think the next thing, you talk about being, the growth of, this village, Seneca Village was just amazing. So you guys don't understand. It was a 32-year span of this village being, established and it was running and it just grew, which is kind of unheard of, especially, during, because you got to understand, like, uh, the Emancipation Proclamation wasn't even created in it. Was like what 10 years afterwards,
Yeah,
and yeah, it was. And so now you like these, free Black people in this 32-year time span have created, this immense community. And so, how do you think they were able, like I said, to sustain their unity and monetary wealth and mindset?
um, I think I think a lot of these cities were
Mm,
built. The idea of them was to be a sustainable, self-sufficient black community, right? So, everybody was working toward that goal. Not only the people that were living there, but you know, the mutual society, the churches, everybody had a common goal into making this city work, right? Because you're talking about people who have been disenfranchised since they've known this land to be theirs. So the thing that's sad is what could have been. You feel what I'm saying? But you also get things like becoming a black man becoming eligible to vote. You get that through Seneca Village. You feel what I'm saying? You get those ideas being a reality. Black people learn how to read. You get that from the school. You get these entities that we didn't have prior that allow us to become better in society. You feel what I'm saying? Become more a part of the society, right? You had to own land to vote.
yes.
Black, you had to own land to vote. How did you own land? You had to find a city like Seneca Village.
And for people who don't know, and you read the story, there were only 100 during that time. There were only 100 Black people in New York that were eligible to vote, and
The
only
entire state.
10 in the entire state, 100 people, and
Mhm.
only 10 of those people came from Seneca Village.
10. So you're talking
10.
about 100 people in the entire state of New York. And New York's a big state, right? So
That's
you're talking
10%, right? That's 10%.
you're talking one town with 10 black voters. That's unheard of in 1840. Unheard of.
Right.
But though this is the foundation. This is the foundation of black people voting. You feel what I'm
Mm.
saying? We always go to
The Civil Rights
civil rights
Movement.
movement and we always go to the Voting Rights Act and things like that. You feel me? But the fight was way before that. You feel what I'm saying? So
Right.
that is something that I really, really, I'm just proud of when I think about Seneca Village and I think about some of the things that they were doing outside of just living, right?
Right. Right. So that's awesome because you talk about that. That leads to my next question. What Seneca, like you said, Seneca Village really was the foundation for voter opportunities, real estate acquisition. People don't understand owning property as a Black person not just gave you voting opportunities, but it gave you so many other things. What were some other opportunities that Black people gained as being property owners of Seneca Village? And I think we talked about the whole voting thing, but what were some other opportunities that Black people were able to gain from buying property? And as you share, I'm gonna give my spiel on why it's important that we own our stuff because it's so much more.
Well, land ownership, especially in the 1800s,
Mm-hmm.
it gave you another level up in the socioeconomic ladder. You feel what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Now that I own land, now I have land to put my business on. You feel what
Right.
I'm saying? Go real easy, A to B, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
have land that I can farm. If I farm, I need workers, right? So now
Mm-hmm.
I'm paying people. Now I have a whole business based off of the land that you were able to acquire. Plus, land doesn't really depreciate. You feel what I'm saying? So, like, if you have land, if you had land in the 1800s, your family was able to keep that land. Oh, you best believe you got money now. You feel what I'm saying? So, just the concept of it, and it's still real prevalent today as far as climbing up a certain economic ladder. If you own land, it's a good way to start making money and create wealth for yourself, especially in the 1800s when land was going. Now everything is built on almost. You feel me? But back
Right,
then,
because Seneca Village, right? The property value for those 10 lots, because it started off at 10, was $250 for 10 lots. 10 lots was $250.
so 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 imagine. I don't want to jump ahead,
Right.
but if I give you $600 to $700 eminent domain money and tell you to get up out of here, just imagine. You feel what I'm saying? So if you're
Right.
talking about when it was bought for 250, by the time the city 30 years later was up, each one of those residents was paid $700 to lead to get up off the lot. But imagine how much that 700 would be worth today if you were able to keep that land for the next 2, 3, 400 years. Like it just doesn't compute, and it makes me sad when I think about it. But I try not to think about it in that context. I try to think about it more like you did. The resilience, what we were able to accomplish, what came from it afterwards, the other cities that were able to pop up, and then being able to have this history to look back on. I wish we had something more than a park sitting there to remind us. Instead, I think
Mhm.
there's a plaque, but we got stories like this, and we got forums like this that we can bring attention and raise awareness about these stories.
Yeah. My next question is to you is so we talked about the eminent domain. So for people who don't know what eminent domain is,
Mhm.
we're giving a lot of history
Break it
today.
down for 'em.
So eminent domain is when the government can come in and take ownership of private property, and they have to utilize it for public use. And the people who own that private property, they will give in exchange for that, they'll give them money. Now, the interesting thing about eminent domain is, are you going to get the money your property is
No,
valued for?
never.
Never.
Because
Never.
you're also thinking about the
Never.
property value, like in the moment. You feel
Right.
me? Like think
Right.
about how valuable land is in the middle of New
Right.
York City. People paying
Right.
$2,000 a month
Exactly.
for rent. Think about how much that land is worth now.
Correct. Correct. So, eminent domain, right? So this Seneca Village was taken by eminent domain by law enacted in New York, and the landowners were undervalued for the land. Why do you think lawmakers in New York suddenly create this law? Because you got to think they have been on that property for 32 years.
So, you know, a lot of our history, a lot of these cities, some of it was white people being vicious, and some of it was just the world continuing to move forward,
Mm-hmm.
and us just not being able to fight the power, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
like for instance, the United States at the time was looking across the water to Paris, which had a park. I forget the name of it. And they said to them, "So we need a park. We need a park that can compare to what they got overseas, right? We always got to one up, you know, Europe. We gotta beat them. This is America. This is how we were built. So plans went into place to try to create a free public park in America that could rival the park across the water, and that's where they came up with the idea for Central Park. Now, black people were just a casualty in that idea. You feel what I'm saying? Like, look, I'm not here to say that it wasn't purposely done or anything like that, but like a lot of the history that I'm doing, I'm finding big central parks built, big highways built, like these big mass, mass things that society now kind of look at and say, oh yeah,
These are landmarks. These
yeah,
are
well, we couldn't do without this highway. Well, imagine when this wasn't here. You feel what I'm saying?
right.
But it ends up being on the backs of our history, a lot of
Mhm.
times.
Awesome. And then my thing is too, do you think the growth of this community triggered them for the future of Black wealth?
I think cities like Seneca Park, stories like Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Black Wall Street, um, all of stories like this all lead the way to to us having black wealth, understanding black wealth, because what history will tell you, especially American history when it comes to black people, is we were resilient. We got it done when a lot of people was trying to hold us back from getting it done. You feel me? So
Mm,
I think these stories, yes, these stories are the ones that founded the whole idea of black wealth, right? And this is why we need to know these stories, because if someone told you that in 1800, a black man created a city in America, it's pride. You feel what I'm saying? We don't have that. We need more of that. We need more pride in our history, pride in our stories, and that's why I'm trying to write these stories, because yeah, there's some juice in there, to keep you engaged, but there's also a lot of pride in these stories, right? And I try to take pride in writing them as well.
yeah, so that answers that. So I was doing some research, right, Bilal, about this whole story about Seneca Village, and I thought it was so interesting. I saw that New York lawmakers would acquire land by eminent domain, right, throughout the entire, like 19th
But they were doing that
century,
all over the country too. So just so you know,
all
but
over the country, everybody, by the way. And so decades prior to them creating eminent domain for, Seneca Village, the property that Seneca Village, was on, they did this to, not too far, like streets above, they did this to build like Manhattan grid streets. So in my head, I thought like, man, they kind of already planned it out. I used to work in construction, and oftentimes like you might, when you get the knock on the door about, oh, it's the intimate domain, to be honest, they're probably in like phase 5
oh,
of
they
their
they
entire,
they ready to kick you out. They
right,
ready
like they're in
to kick
phase
you
5
out.
of the project of what their big scope is. You know what I'm saying? I said, so with this information, do you think property owners of, Seneca Village, but they would have created a plan to stop this from happening?
Eminent domain is just one of those tools in the toolbox, that's one of those unstoppable tools in the toolbox of
Right.
of the government. Like it's just something that they've used for a very long time and still use to this day,
Yes.
to up off the land that they need, right?
Right.
Now you get the caveat of, well, yeah, we're gonna pay you, but at the same time, like I said, you'll never get the value back ever once you
No.
sell. But the problem is you don't give them a choice. Eminent domain kind of seems like a choice, but it's not a choice. It's get out. Here's some bread, but get out. So
Right.
it's tough to see, even I mean, especially in 1800s, it's tough to see black people even being able to understand the law to the level, because some residents tried to sue, some did,
Yeah, they
you know
did. They did try to sue. They fought for their lives because they understood, like they understood there were some underlying grants. Like you talked about the New York Mutual Fund. To be honest, people don't know Seneca Village was found, like the development of the New York Mutual Fund was helped by, was funded by the Seneca Village. And so, not only that, I think also too, like when it started off with 10 plots, people were just acquiring so much money because people was renting out those properties. You know what I'm saying? So not only were you a property owner, but you were also a rent. You were a landlord to people of color in your community, so they could establish wealth. So it wasn't just to keep them in debt, but it was like, hey, you rent out this property, you can own. And that was, I saw that, I thought it was so unique that you highlighted in your story, and that they don't share is how that's what how it grew the community, you know what I'm saying? And so that's how it's able to have that funding and that money, and not just for blacks, but Irish immigrants as well. So I thought that was pretty dope to
No,
discuss.
you're absolutely right. I mean, if you think about how to build a community, you have to start at the top, but then it has to kind of grow like a plant, like a tree. You feel what I'm saying? With all of these different branches that all have leaves, right? So let's call the leaves money, right? Every
Right,
single branch got a leaf on it. You feel them? They all start from the trunk, right? Which is William Hamilton, the society, mutual society that helped fund some of these things. But then from there, branches, right? You
right,
you you rent your lot, you hire three people to work your lot. You feel me? Those three people is taking that money to their family, and you see how it branches out, right? So now you have these levels in this ecosystem of black money. You feel me? And some people are able in that ecosystem to create wealth if you're more at the top, but you're also able to make a living if you're not at the top, right? And we're talking about during a time period where black people had to struggle to make a living. You feel what I'm saying? Had to struggle through disenfranchisement, had to struggle to make a living, in the North as well as the South. And we always talk about the South, right? Slavery was in New York City, and they didn't get rid of that until like 1799, or, and even to vote, even when they passed the law to vote, they gave it a grace period, right? You had to own land, and you wasn't allowed to not be a slave until 1827, right? So it's like
right. And
30.
so it's like if you were a slave before like 1817 to 1827, I was like, wow. And then on top of that, I had to own property. And at the time, the market value for property was at like three, was not, so that 250, they got to steal. The property value at the time was probably with like 500.
Mhm.
And you got to think about it. People don't have, if I'm a slave, I'm a free slave. The thing they don't tell you about is when they free them, they put them in a poor, disenfranchised community, not just black people, but Irish immigrants too. Put
Yeah.
them in a poor where they kill each other because it's poor, is disease infested. So not only am I not gonna be able to make no money in my community where I'm being settled at, but I'm also might have some diseases going on, just a whole lot of different things. And so it was just interesting that had it came with stipulations. And I think they thought that was going to be the revolving door, like, well, yeah, we're going to give you freedom, but at this cost. Yeah,
Mhm.
we're going to give you, like, you can vote, but at this cost. You know what I'm saying? And even when you and the funny thing is, voting at, even I know we talked about with Seneca Village, it created voting opportunities. But before Seneca Village was even created, when you did acquire as a black person to buy property, you had to own the property for 2 years. 2 years.
It always feels like they just keep
2 years.
moving the goalposts further and further.
Right.
You kick it, the field goal. You're like, yeah, nah, bro. You have to kick that from 20 more yards. But
Yeah.
that shows you the resilience.
That
Don't.
shows you the
And
resilience.
I have to say this to all black people watching. Please, this is your country just as much as it is anybody else's that's here, right? So once you grasp that concept, like this is yours, right?
Yeah.
Then you can start to have some pride in our journey, because it was
Right.
a journey. You feel what I'm
Yeah.
saying? We're still in the journey right now, you know?
Right. Right.
So have pride in that idea. This is my land. This is my country. You feel
This is
me?
my right.
This is ours,
This is
like,
ours together. This is
yes, when I
ours
say
to
ours, I don't mean like just ours. No, I
yeah.
said
No. I'm saying
yeah,
yeah, ours.
this is
And
our stuff. Like everybody, like so when we talk about our history, we talk about American history. You know,
and the question that was asked, um,
you had some good questions
well,
by colleagues. Let's hear
oh,
them.
you said what? Keep them going.
You had some good colleague questions. I want to hear some more of your colleagues' questions.
Let me hear my so my colleague question asked was when significant. they was excited about this. So when significant portions of the North, South, and Central United States have demonstrated that they cannot tolerate our prosperity historically, as illustrated by the massacre, explosions, and lynchings, in our very own existence appears to cause them anxiety today, as illustrated by living while black. Police altercations have witnessed, and the whole Karen phenomenon. What is the end game for Black Americans? And what logical and reasonable goal can we expect to achieve?
Black people aren't a monolith. You feel me? We all think differently in our lives, and we all move
Hmm.
differently in our lives. But as a whole, like I said before, I think we need to find pride in our history and in our stories. Um, because if we can do that, it will mean more to us. I just think that we don't care enough about the past, you know, and the past can teach you the future in a lot of ways. You feel what I'm saying? So pride in that, because a lot of times black people feel like we had to create this new identity and this new culture, right? Because it was stripped away, right? So we created hip hop, we gave the world us in the newer light, right?
Hmm.
But I do think that history is very important, because without it, we're lost. When like for instance, if you don't vote, I'm not judging, but if you don't vote, go read the story. You feel what I'm saying? Like they worked hard. They had, you feel me? They went through a lot to vote, right? So that right there, if you understand that, can give you pride in doing it now. You feel what I'm saying? If you really understand how hard it was for black people to vote back then, right? I feel like it would give you a little bit more pride now, to participate, because all we wanted to do was participate, and now we have the opportunity, but it doesn't seem like we have embraced it, right? And I think that's what history can do. It can help us towards embracing our past and embracing who we are as a people and what we need to do as a people.
Oh, but what the last question is: the fact that in spite of these atrocities, we are still here and have accomplished what we should have been evidence of both resilience and that favors upon us. Our accomplishment in this culture is so hostile to our existence, should have made what we have accomplished impossible. But here we are, as we talked about, that resilience, that pride. We're
Yeah.
here. In the face of adversity, we continue to overcome and command whatever space we firmly plant our feet in. In spite of factual challenge we face, what does the truth of our successes say about our future and its trajectory?
We ain't going nowhere.
Facts. We here.
We ain't going nowhere. You feel what I'm
Facts,
saying?
baby.
So with that being said,
Facts.
I think stop, mama, get down. I'm almost done. Um, we need to live in that idea. We need to live in the idea of there's going to be trials and tribulations. Our ancestors had to go through it. Our parents had to go through it. How are we going to, in turn, better it? So, for instance, when I'm an ancestor, right? What are they going to say I did? What are they going to say I did to help advance what we got going on, right? I think if everybody asked themselves that question, and it don't gotta be, you ain't gotta be Martin Luther King. You feel what I'm saying? It's only one of them. But what can you do family wise, right? Right in the circle of your family, what can you do to help advance the cause? You feel what I'm saying? And help us move towards where we think we should be, right? Back then it was about voting. We can vote. We can vote. You feel me? So let's participate and do the things that we need to do so we can continue to get where we need to go. I would love, now I'm all for multiculturalism and things like that, but I would love to see a black person found a city, now. Like that just doesn't happen anymore. I know they're trying to build cities. I mean, I read on the internet all the time about
Yeah,
new
you
cities.
see what's happening in Stone Mountain. They're rebuilding the new Black Wall Street. Yeah, they bought that land in Middle Georgia, creating black, a safe space for black people.
I would like to see
So,
that. Where's the Black Walmart?
mm,
Where's that at?
true.
You feel what I'm saying? Where's Walmart has every single thing you could possibly want to buy. Where's that with all black products? And look, I'm not saying take away from Walmart. Walmart will be fine. You feel me? It'll be okay, right? But it's just starting to do things um purposely, right? For the next generation, for when we're ancestors, right? Because we're in the moment and we don't realize, one day I'm gonna be an ancestor, great, great, great ancestor that did something. And hopefully you'll be able to tell a story that matters.
Right. Right. I think one of the important stories is I think something that people think like, no, we got voting rights. And I think we're just so used to the funny thing is when you're talking about being an ancestor, the things that they fought for, I hate to say it, but we're still fighting to sustain. That's how you
Yes.
can be an ancestor. It
But
does not, the fight does not stop. You
no.
don't understand, like there are more imminent domains created in for property value, in for gentrification. That's another way. You know what I'm
Plus
saying?
things evolve, and
Right.
one of the things that we don't mention about in evolution is what
Hmm.
freedom is. Freedom evolves
Yes.
too. You feel what I'm saying? Back then, it was literally chains and shackles and chains. Now
Right.
they it's up here. You feel what I'm saying? It's shackles and chains up here, right? Like so, freedom changes as well. So every generation is going to have to fight for their freedom. It's just going to look a little
Right.
different.
Exactly. Exactly. I think for us, I think we're fighting for the consistency of our freedom. You know what I'm saying? Like, me and you talked about, one thing I really loved about the Seneca Village story is we're fighting for the stories to be told. You know what I'm saying? Like we're not hearing these stories. The property, like I think property, it just gave me a really more ideal aspect, our perspective to think about how we as blacks acquire property, are why it is such a struggle for us to acquire property even if we have the money. Let's talk about appraisals. If
You have
I'm
to
a
be
certain color, I
you
might
have
have property to get appraisal.
you have to be taught that game. It's a
Yes.
game. So we just went through an entire story about in the 1840s when we weren't allowed to play the game. We only had a couple people playing the game, right? So if
And those
you
couple people showed everybody else how to play the game.
yes, they did, but in other circles, like in the white communities, they was teaching everybody how to play the game. You feel what I'm saying? I mean, there was a point in time when they was like, go out west, go grab land. You feel what I'm saying? Like, just go right now, go out west, grab land, whatever you need. So like it's in their DNA to understand certain things that's not in our DNA yet. You feel me? We got to get there. Banking, you feel me? The housing the whole housing culture, we're starting to get there, but as a whole, we have not necessarily embraced it, right? So we tend to kind of be behind the eight ball overall. I'm not saying everybody because there are some wonderful black bankers, there are some, wonderful black real estate agents and black business owners and property owners and things like that. But it is our world, and I'm sad to say, our world is more so in the entertainment realm right now. And I would rather our world be in some other places as well, so we can show some dominance there as well.
Awesome. All right, let's get to some Q&A. I see some people comment, made some.
Questions?
Right. One of the I'll read for Mr. Charles had a I'm gonna read all his questions. He said, how could any leader with vision not see potential in people they trust to work in their company?
Read me that question one more time.
How could any leader with vision not see potential in people they trust to work in their company.
And what's the context? I mean, are we talking about like anybody?
Yeah, Mr. Charles,
Good question. I was just
yeah,
wondering.
yeah.
Um,
I think it was more so when we talked about the Whiteheads when they gave them the
mhm.
property, when he asked that question, when they gave them the property for 250, and they maybe saw the vision when they gave them the property. So I think that's in that context.
What's interesting about that is, there's not a lot of research that I was able to find on the why these certain things happened, right? Why they were able to sell their land, what did they think about black people? Like these are questions that I definitely asked myself. Because you're right. I mean, if you're white, you can see the value in giving a black person land right here, especially if you that person still got to pay you, you feel me, and kick back up like most businesses do. So there is a possibility that that was the case. You feel what I'm saying? There's a possibility that the Whiteheads saw a vision, and wanted to be a part of that vision. And there's
Mhm.
also a chance they was like, yo, we got to get this land off our hands before we lose money. Either one.
Great.
Yeah.
Either one. He also stated it was a result of Napoleon's end policy. Oh, I don't think that was a question. That was more of that was more of a comment. It was a comment. Anybody else got any questions about just Seneca Village and the history of what it was? I think it was such a unique story because I think we when we think about Seneca Village, I think the things that in correlations to that story, we think about Black Wall Street, and
Mhm.
we always think about the massacre of things and everything that we got taken from us. We had to die for, and I one thing I thought was so interesting about Seneca Village was that it was another way of it was more strategic. It
Mhm.
wasn't as like I think we think about uh Black Wall Street, our lynchings and all of that, it was very forced, it was very abrasive. It was like we killed like we burning it down. You know what I'm saying? And we want y'all to smell the burns and that trauma. But I think with Seneca, it was a more about strategicness of how do we take things from them, or not even just things, how do we strategically play the game? Because the whole the whole foundation of it is all about strategy. And I think we can also see that now because that's what real estate is about and property. It was all about strategy. So I think that was something I thought was unique. It was like, how do we strategically move them out without them not, you know what I'm saying?
So I do think you're right. Another thing that I think is a really interesting thing to research. Same point that you um in the 1930s. Now this is after, right? Uh
Right, right.
President Franklin D. Roosevelt, they started building dams. I don't know if they started building dams all over the country.
Hmm.
Some of those dams ended up in places where there were black cities. You feel what I'm
Wow,
saying?
right.
So for instance, there's a dam here in Georgia. What's the dam that uh Lake
Lake
Lanier?
Lanier? You
Yeah.
like Lanier?
So Lake Lanier was built from a dam. You feel what I'm saying? They cut it off. Like you flood it, you put the dam there, you make a lake. That's how you make a lake. But then obviously we've heard about the story of Lake Lanier and that being underneath the lake, which was built man-made, which was a man-made lake. And a lot of those man-made lakes started popping up um, around that time period when they started building dams in the 1930s, a little bit before then. When you start like the Hoover Dam was built in the 1930s. So that's another history point to definitely dig in and
Hmm.
see like what was this dam built on, what was created from the dam, because usually when there's a dam created there's a lake, and what was there before. I left that
Mm.
for y'all to go do some research.
Go
You feel,
research.
you feel
Well, that is awesome. Listen, me and you, Bilal, we could go in our journalism content bag all day, especially thinking about these stories, because that's just that's what we do. And I was excited to talk about this. I think this was amazing. Anybody have any more questions or thoughts that they want to, drop in the comments that you want to share or you want to ask us before we kind of just wrap it up? Because I think this is something so good and it's so juicy. And I think sometimes it's uncomfortable to talk about
Yeah.
because we
Oh,
don't
yeah.
know. We
Yeah.
don't know. We
Sometimes
don't know.
Black history is uncomfortable.
It is.
Yes,
It
that's true.
is. It's very uncomfortable.
Mhm. But you
It's
you
very
gotta fight through it. I mean, this is the story. It's like uh, without the yin and the yang. You're gonna have some pain, but you're also gonna have some joy. You know,
right.
so you gotta ride the wave.
Right. Exactly. But then,
Now,
like I said, go
go ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead.
No,
No,
you
you
go
go.
ahead. I'm done. Go ahead.
You go.
Like we said, the whole aspect about this story and the perspective I love that you gave was really more so the resilience
Hmm.
than anything throughout the whole story. And I dropped the link in the comment section so you guys can read the story. Is it was the resilience part when that you gave a lot of history and we talked about that history and we did a whole deep dive in the background of the history about William Alexander, just even how they zoned out before they even thought about destroying, not destroying, but doing the eminent domain with Seneca Village. So I think that's also something amazing that you guys need to see. And if you listen, but one thing I thought was so dope is that you provided more information than the actual Central Park observance. I was like, oh my God.
Uh,
Oh my God.
I'll take that. You feel me? I'll take that as a compliment. Um,
Somebody says, are there any other Black folklore stories that you think have good ties to Black History Month? Oh, there's so many. There's so many. There's
so
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 many.
so just for context, I've written about 7 or 8 Black folklore stories since I've been senior editor at News One. I'll drop the link of those stories. Um, this year, I will be dropping one Black folklore story a month. Um, Actually, perfect timing. Monday, I'm going to be dropping a new story about a city under another lake. And that city is in Alabama. The lake is Lake Martin. So, if you wanted to dive into that story, go for it. But I will be getting that story written. It's already started, but it'll be finished this weekend. We're going to publish it on Monday. But if you want to learn about the New Mexico black town called Blackdom, right? If you want to learn about Slave Girl Molly and the haunted house in Savannah, like those stories I've written, I'll share links. We wrote the Black City under Lake Lanier here in Georgia. So there's tons and tons of stories. Hopefully, this is just the beginning, and we'll continue to uncover and dive deeper into some of these things. I'd like to pull up. You feel me? I'd like to pull up and do a little pull up research, but in due time, we'll get there.
Well, Bilal, when I talked to you about this story, I already told you I think these stories, and I don't like to say they folklores because they're actually real history. I think they erased them to make them seem like they were folklore.
Yeah,
Um,
it's the history. If I could get to certain answers, I would
yes.
call it Black history.
Yeah.
You know, but there's certain things that I just can't get to.
Right. Well, anyway, I'm excited. This is a great conversation, a great discussion. I hope you guys, thank you, Bilal, for being on. I hope you guys, I hope you guys really enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure you read the story on Seneca Village by Bilal. It was a really great story. I loved it. I learned so much. The William Alexander piece blew my mind. Like it blew.
Me too. Me too.
It blew. I knew about the whole Seneca Village like story about Central Park, but the William Alexander part, and then the tie-in with the New York Mutual Fund, that just kind of like oh my God, I was just like, this is so amazing. So anyway, thank you again. This is a discussion about the untold stories of Black history. Um, Man, we have to do this again, not just on Black History Month, but we got to do these often, and not just about Black history. There's some more other untold stories. One thing I thought was dope is you tied in the Irish immigrants. I thought that was
Yes,
dope.
yes, because it's part of the story that people need to know.
It was not just Black. That's why Black people was Irish people too.
Exactly.
So I thought that was dope. But anyway, I hope you guys love it. Make sure you share this with people. Watch the replay. You'll learn so many different things. If you see some things that you find nuggets, he has the link to his article in the comment section. And go and do your research more on this stuff, because we dropped a lot a lot of about untold stories. So I'm excited. I hope you guys understand the importance. And remember, when we think about history, it's all about the pride and the resilience of Black folk that makes our stories beautiful.
Facts.
So anyway, facts. Alrighty, guys. We love you guys. I hope to see you next time.
All right, y'all. Happy Black History Month.
Happy Black History Month.